Okay, so I'm going to be going over hopefully every feature of Retro Diffusion. I'll do my best to remember all of them, but some of them might kind of escape my brain because it's been a while since I added them. This is as of version 13.0.0. So just, if you're on a later version, there might be new stuff or some stuff might have changed. Usually changes aren't too dramatic, so just kind of follow along and see if things make sense or not. Hopefully they do. This is going to be a pretty long video, and I'm probably not going to do very much editing. So I'll add some chapter marks to tell you kind of where things are. But other than that, it's going to be a long one. So maybe take it in a couple watches here, and if you want to learn some features, this is going to be kind of the main guide. All right, let's get started. We'll talk about the setup first. So here in the File section, you go to Setup Retro Diffusion. This can also be found in a couple of other locations, and I'll talk about those in a bit. So for starters, it's got View Guide Video. And when you click this, it'll just open up in your browser. Same with View Documentation here. Then we've got Requirements. You do need exactly Python 3.11. And the specific version I recommend is 3.11.6. This might be a little different on Linux with an AMD GPU. Might be better to go with 3.10. You can figure that out as, you run into issues or maybe things go perfect first time and you don't need to worry about it. That would be cool. Next here is Git. Git is needed so that you can download some of the code required, because when you install the extension itself, it doesn't contain all of the code, and that's just so you're not downloading like a multi-gigabyte Aseprite extension file. And then you can click the check requirements here, and that will let you know if it finds everything. So this found everything, and we're all good. You've got two settings down here. This depends on how much VRAM your graphics card has, and the way you can find that out is by opening your task manager. Let's see, here we go, and going to the performance setting, or performance tab here, and then to your GPU, and then looking at the dedicated GPU memory. And then the CPU version, if you have less than 4 gigabytes of that VRAM, you need to use the CPU version. We also have file locations. This location here is going to be where your Python virtual environment is. So it sets up a Python virtual environment for you. That's just so, any other pieces of Python code you have running on your computer, maybe you're developing something, maybe you're working on something else. That's so that it doesn't mess with those. This advanced setting here, you can manually specify the path to your Git executable using this. Do make note that the path will be in git cmd git.exe, not git bin git.exe. That's a little bit confusing, but that's just how they have it set up. The Python path, you can also specify that, so you can point it to a specific version of Python. This can be helpful if maybe you're running Python 3.12, right? This isn't compatible with Python 3.12, so you would also install 3.11.6, and then you could select that Python executable here. All right, here you can select the folder where it's going to put your AI models. So this is all of the models that Retro Diffusion uses, either for generating images or expanding text prompts, or maybe looking at images and describing them. Then the LoRa folder. This is where it'll store all of the modifiers. So the things that create different styles, different looks to the images that you generate. And you can check these boxes here. You do really want to install the general pixel art models, just because that's how the program works. This palette gen model, we'll get to that in a second. It's a bit older, it's kind of weird, but it can also be really cool. So it'll give you a little expected download size thing here. When you go ahead and you click Setup Environment, it should open up a terminal and it'll start like displaying graphics and installing stuff. If you run into errors there, just contact me, preferably via the Retro Diffusion Discord. That's discord.gg/retrodiffusion. That's how you can join the Discord there. I'm not actually going to run the installation right now because I already have it installed, so I'm just going to close that. So that's how the setup works. Now we'll move over into basic text to image generation. So you go to Sprite like I just did there, and you can open text to image from there. We'll go down the settings here. So first off, you have the prompt. This is what you are generating. This is the image that you're making. Then you have the negative. That's things that maybe you want to avoid in that image you're generating. Preferably leave negative blank unless you're noticing like a specific thing that you don't like about the images it's making, and then you can try and discourage that using the negative. You have presets. This is where you can store those combinations of prompts and negatives. So if you have a prompt that you really like, you can keep it here so that you don't forget it later. Then moving down, you have the width and the height. This is, the width and height in pixels. That's how large the image is that you're generating. I recommend sticking under 200 by 200, just because this model here running on the local version right now, as of version 13, is not super great at high resolution. It's trained at 64 by 64, so that's the size that it does best at. These are the size presets, so you can just click these and it'll set that size automatically for you, and you can swap the two numbers, and that's just nice, quick, and easy if you're generating specific stuff. So the seed is kind of the random number that the whole process starts with, and if you leave the seed the same and you leave all the other settings the same, it'll generate the same image. So you can use that to kind of change, little pieces about it. Or maybe you find a seed that you like, or it's how you can repeat things that you generated before is by using that same seed. So maybe you have the prompt all set up and you want to just mess around with how the different modifiers here look on that image. You can leave the seed the same and you can generate with different modifiers, and that'll kind of show you the changes on that same image. The generations is how many images you're creating in one batch, so all at one go. There are some slight speed advantages to creating more images at once, but I generally don't recommend making more than one unless you have the settings exactly where you want them. If I click the Show Advanced Options here, you can also see the Scale setting. This refers to something called CFG scale, or classifier free guidance scale. This is a more technical setting. Generally, you don't need to worry about it. If you know what it means, then good for you, and you can kind of figure out what to do with it from there. But I'm not gonna cover that a ton in this guide. Okay, over here in image style settings, up top we have the quality setting. And this is sort of related to the number of steps that the model makes. If you're familiar with other AI applications, that's kind of what the quality is. Higher quality will be more steps, lower quality will be less steps. But it also does some other things along the way to kind of improve the results of lower step generations, as well as making higher steps still look really good. Generally, I recommend leaving this at 5. There's kind of no reason to go above that. The higher options are just like if you really want to. Okay, then going down, we've got the composition settings. This is actually something that's unique to Retro Diffusion, and that's really, really cool. So if I click this Edit Composition here, it'll open up a whole menu. And this menu has this little kind of color gauge here. And you can actually change the settings using these little graphs, these little bars, these sliders, and you can see how that affects this image here, and it'll actually apply these sort of color correction changes in generation. So this isn't post-processing. This isn't like it's generating the image and then it's changing the colors. It's actually generating the image with those color modifications inherent to it. And this can let you do some really neat things. Maybe if you're looking for a nighttime scene, you can change the brightness here, so you can make the whole thing darker, or you can make the whole thing lighter. You can change the contrast. You can change even some outline settings we have here. Now this doesn't display in this window because there's no outlines there. But if you want thicker outlines, you can change stuff there. You can show these little markers here, so you know kind of where these settings are. You can reset them to 0. You can also just click that reset button. So these are super cool because you can use them to influence the color of the images as you're generating them. There's also a lighting option here. And so you see that pops up this little orbiting view, and you can actually move this light around the scene, and it will roughly reflect those movements in the image that you generate. And this is super useful if maybe you have a portrait that you want lit from a specific direction. You can use this to do that. So I'm going to close that out and reset it. I don't need that setting going right now. Then you've got the model setting here, and you've got pixel art, which is everything. This will automatically switch between the two models that it has, depending on what size you're generating at. You can also force it to use a specific model, either the 16 by 16 one or the 64 by 64 one. And that's referring to the resolution that the model is trained at. And a model is always going to be best around the resolution that you train it at. I'm going to leave it just the default one. So then we're moving down here into the modifiers, and the modifiers are basically the style of the image. So this is going to determine mostly what your image looks like. Prompts will have a bit of an effect. Other things might have an effect, like if you have an input image. But generally, it's going to be from these modifiers. So by default, it's got top-down enabled at 35% and modern enabled at 40%. You can actually change these to negative values, and that can kind of be interesting sometimes. It's not really practical most of the time, so that's a thing that you can experiment with on your own. There's a ton of different modifiers here, and I've got a couple extra loaded right now. But the default modifiers are from PlayStation up, and there's a bunch of different ones: game characters, anime, tiling, isometric, front-facing, modern, blah 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 blah. Bunch of different modifiers. Generally, you can kind of just experiment with those, figure out what they each do, and yeah, they're pretty cool, especially when you start combining multiple of them. You can get really unique styles that are pretty consistent just from combining those modifiers with certain strengths. Okay, now in the post-processing area, we have show preview. So this will show you a preview of the image as it's being generated. It can slow down image generation a little bit when you have this enabled, but I think the visual is kind of worth it. It looks really cool. Then there's strong text guidance, and what this does is it's a little difficult to explain technically what it's doing, but from a conceptual standpoint, it basically just makes the model better at understanding the prompt you're giving it. So it'll know what you mean more when you type stuff. It also requires a little bit more processing power to do that. So just be aware that if you're at the minimum requirement for the computer specifications, you might not be able to have strong text enabled. But generally, it's a good idea to enable it. Add to prompt here uses a large language model to kind of add content to your prompts. So it changes them a little bit, it modifies them, it makes them longer and more detailed. This is Normally, I wouldn't leave this enabled, just because it can change the prompt in unexpected ways. Because we're running a pretty small large language model, and that's just so it can fit on pretty reasonable specifications. So it's not all that smart, but it can do some cool stuff if maybe you just want to see like a cool landscape and you don't really care about the specifics. That can be a good setting to enable for that. Next, we have the fast pixel decoder. So this is if you're noticing that generations are kind of going all the way through the progress bar and then they're stopping for a long time, and then they're getting put back into Aseprite and rendered. This is something that you'll probably want to turn on because it basically takes that last little step that the model does to render the final image, and it makes it a whole lot faster. It lowers the quality slightly, but it'll also be more accurate to that preview image that you're getting if you have show preview enabled. And it's just so much lighter on your computer, and it's a lot faster. Automatically reduce output colors here. This setting will reduce the number of colors in the final image. This is really helpful because generally for pixel art, you have a limited color palette and you only want a certain number of colors from the image to appear. So this just does that automatically for you. You can turn it off if you want to do that process manually and have a little bit more accuracy, but usually I just leave this on. I don't think I've turned it off in like the past few months, honestly. These settings here this determines how the images you're generating get returned back into Aseprite. So here we have save as frames. So every new generation will be a new frame in your timeline. We also have save as layers, or sorry, I should say it'll be a new layer with a new frame. So if I go ahead and generate an image, it would make a new layer here, and that would be your image. But if I had this generations setting set to like 4 or something, it would generate one new layer and then 1, 2, 3, 4 frames. Save as layers will do that kind of same thing, but with layers, so it'll make a new layer for each image. And save as grid will make a new layer and try and kind of lay out the images in a square within your canvas. For advanced options here, we have tiling. I don't recommend using these. So these two options, they're very technical, and what they do is they mathematically force the image you're generating to have seamless edges. So in other words, you could take the image and put it right next to each other, and they would match. It would be seamless. You wouldn't be able to tell where the images separated. But this can mess up the model a bit if you're not careful. And so instead of using these, I recommend using the tiling modifier. This is just a lot better in most cases that you'd want that tiling. We also have this adherence, and this is related to the strong text guidance. So this will tell it how strong you want that strong text guidance. Generally, I leave it at 3 because it's a good balance between the old text guidance and the strong text guidance. Because the slightly, well, I guess the dumber version, quote unquote, it has a little bit more understanding of some pop culture things. For example, like Mario, Sonic, older video games, celebrities, things like that. It just has a better understanding of those. So it's good to have its influence a little bit in the mixture. All right, I think, well, okay, those aren't all the settings. So show modifiers here, that will enable or disable those modifiers. Input size with sliders. So you can change this so that you can input the sizes with numbers directly. And then process in background. This will just stop the terminal from popping to the foreground. Generally, I leave that off because I like to have that visual. So we'll go ahead and we'll click OK here. I'm just running with the default prompt and the default settings. So that pops up this, first off, this generation preview, but then it also opened this terminal window. And so this will start, you know, having stuff put into it, and it'll import libraries here. This is the first time that I'm loading it after restarting my PC, so it'll take a little bit, but subsequent times will be much, much faster. So we'll just wait for this here. And I'm not going to speed anything up for this video. I'm just going to leave the times as they are. All right, there we go. We can see it loaded. It gives you this information about your system up top. This can be helpful for debugging things. It gives you this nice little graphic, and then it tells you some information about what it's doing. So now it's loading that primary model. It only has to load the model once, so if you're using the same model again, it won't need to reload it, and that can save some time. That text encoder, that T5 text encoder, that's what's doing the strong text guidance, and that takes a little bit to load there. All right, and now it's going to start generating the image, and you can see as it progressed, it showed stuff over here, and now we have that image in our canvas. Pretty neat. So now I could open up text image again, or I could have just left it open, and I can go to change the settings a bit. So let's get something more industrial looking here. So this will change the style that it's working with. So you can see it's a little bit more gritty. The colors are more granular, and I can keep turning this up, and it'll actually change the way that it looks a lot more. Yeah, so now you can see that's pretty rigid with those outlines, with the colors. They're a lot more faded, and so you can see how the modifiers here will affect the style of the image. Now there are some warnings in place if you set these strength values to ridiculous numbers. I recommend sticking between like 20 and 80 strength on the modifiers. It's generally not a good idea to go lower or higher than that. Some modifiers will actually tell you like the range that you want to use. Like if I turn on this tiling modifier and I set its strength really low. Oh, it actually didn't give me a warning there. That's fine. Some of them, and clearly I've forgotten where the limit on this one is, some of them will tell you like, there we go. Maximum recommended strength for tiling modifier is 70%. Higher values may cause unpredictable results. So it gives you some warnings about what you're using. And this is really, really helpful maybe if you're just experimenting and you don't know what a good setting would be. All right, with that done, I'm going to go ahead and close that. And then we have, we'll use this image. So the next thing I'm going to go over is image to image. This is very similar to text to image, but you can use an input image here. So first off, you need to, have a selection, so like that, and your selection needs to have content in it, right? So it needs to have actual pixels inside the selection. If I select this, it's not going to work because there's no pixels there. If I'm on a layer that doesn't have any content, even if I select over this, it's not going to work because there's no pixels there. So you need to be on the correct layer, then the correct frame, and you need to have a selection with pixels in it. But what we can do from here is we can, again, generate something based off of that image. And a couple new settings to this, so if maybe I have the size set to 128 by 128, but this selection I have is 64 by 64. I can just quickly snap to selection, and that'll change the width and height according to that selection that I've made. Then we also get the in-paint dialog here, and you can open that up. Ooh, that doesn't look right. Well, I don't know what's up with that. There we go. It was just being a little weird with the selection because I had done some other stuff to it. All right, you can open up the in-paint dialog, And this would let you, like, if I just wanted to replace the Raven, I can cover it with this noise, and then it'll regenerate that part of the image. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to use in painting, but that's how you would go about it. This strength value refers to the strength of the generated image. So lower strength will be more like this, and higher strength will be more generated, more processed. I'm going to leave it at 75 for now. I don't think there are any extra advanced options. Nope, no extra advanced options. All right, so I'm just going to hit OK, and that'll start generating a new image based off of that previous one. So you can see that this is using the style of the modifiers that we have selected, but it's also following that shape and color of the image that we used as an input. So that's kind of how image-to-image works. And you can use this pretty effectively. Generally, you want the prompt you're using to already make similar images to the one that you have selected. Otherwise, it's not going to work super well, and it might be a little bit weird. So there's some learning with all of this. There's some learning curve to it, and some stuff that you kind of just need to figure out and get a feel for to use as effectively as possible. All right, let's move on to the next thing here. What do we got? We got neural tools. Okay, those are fun. I'm gonna give me a second here to load up an image. Let's use this one. Okay, so I've got this image here. This was made with DALL-E 3, and you can see it's trying to be pixel art. It really is, but it's not pixel art. So it's got that kind of look, but I want to turn it into pixel art. So I'm going to select the whole thing and then go into Neural Tools and Pixelate. And this is Pixelate. This is the tool you can use for pixelating images using the Retro Diffusion model. So I'm going to set the size to, let's go 128 by 128. You could also set that with this pixel size setting. So that's basically, it's looking at the image you have. And so this is 512 by 512. And it's like if each group of pixels were 4 by 4. That's kind of how you can think of that. You can lock or unlock the ratio. So I could make, a 128 by 188 image, and that would kind of just stretch the whole thing a little bit. I'm going to keep that ratio locked, and we're just going to go with 128 by 128. You can enter a description manually, or you can have the model recognize the content of the image and describe it for you. You can also do a hybrid of that, so you can leave this checkbox enabled, and you could describe it, and it would take your description and add to it stuff that it thinks is relevant on top of it. Or you can just go with pure manual description. I'm going to leave it automatic because it's easier. It's got some of the same settings as the other menu, but you've got this use image colors or use generated colors option. So if you use the generated colors, it will just create a new image based off of the old one, and it'll use the colors from that. Or the use image colors one will, at the end of the process, it'll try and match the colors of the new image to the colors of the old image. I recommend leaving it at this use generated colors. So I'm going to click OK. It's going to load some stuff. It's got to load the vision model to detect kind of the description for that image. And you can see it did not describe it very well. So we're gonna work on that here. Okay, so it did not like the selection that I made at all. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to convert that background thing to a layer. Hopefully it will like that a lot more. Yeah, it wasn't happy. So when it gets unhappy, you can do this cool thing called shut down image generator. This will actually close the terminal, and then you can reopen it with your next thing here. So let's try that again. I've got this new selection. I've got, it's on the correct layer, and we will see how it goes. It's got to load those things again. You can see loading it took a lot less time this go around. There we go, a cartoon house with a thatched roof and a stone pathway. A lot more accurate description. All right, and there we go. We've got our pixel art version. So you can change the styles here, the modifiers, and you can get different looks for this. So I'm actually going to turn on that industrial modifier again, and I'm going to set it to 60%. Then we're going to go back to that original image, and hold on. There we go. Select the whole thing, and let's run that pixelation again. So now it'll be generating with a slightly different style because we changed the modifiers. So you can see the outlines are a lot heavier and the colors are a bit different. You can also, of course, change it just by regenerating it. So I can make another image. And you can see I'm being careful about which layer I'm selecting, just because that's how it selects the content that you use. Okay, and you can see that this generation is just a little bit different from the other one. You could also set a different size. So if I wanted to make a 256 by 256 one, and higher sizes take longer to generate. That's just how it works. There's more stuff to compute. So this will take a little bit. Higher sizes also can be a little bit wonky, so they'll have more like artifacts and more noise. That's just, again, that's the nature of the process. It's just something that's bound to happen. Not really avoidable with this model that we're using. All right, you're going to notice a bit of a jump there. I actually had to shut down my image recording software so that I could render out that image. That kind of tells you just how demanding this image generation stuff is. I'm on a 3090, and I still needed to have this as the only program running so that I could get an output from it. And that's just kind of the way things are. You're not going to be doing this while you're playing video games or recording videos or other things like that. So we're kind of pushing the limits here. But you can see that generation completed. It took a little over a minute actually to get the whole thing done. But you can also see that the resolution is, obviously higher because we set the size higher. And then it's also got this pretty crisp style. And I think that's a generally faithful recreation of this original image. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go back to that base layer, and I'm going to show you what it looks like with the use image colors thing. So let's head there, back to pixelate. I'm going to leave this size the same. I'm actually going to turn on the fast pixel decoder, and I'm going to turn on use image colors. And we're going to give it another go. Hopefully this won't hang now since we're using that fast pixel decoder. We'll see. It should be fine. Using up basically all of my processing power right now. You can see it kind of added a little bit more greenery than expected. All right, there we go. And it generated and came back. And you can see that it restricted the colors back to the original colors of this image. Looks pretty good. Yeah, so that's how Neural Tool Pixelate works. Let's go back here. Okay, we're going to select this image. This is how I'll show the next Neural Tool, which is Resize. This is 64 by 64. Let's go up to 96 by 96. It's a nice bump. I'm going to turn off the fast pixel decoder because we should be fine at this size. And I'm going to go back to top down at 35% here. So what Resize does is it basically tries to take the image that you have selected and resize it using the pixel art model. So it regenerates the image at that new size. And that's because normally just resizing pixel art, you break stuff. So I'll show you kind of an example of that compared to what it's doing here. All right, so you can see we've got this new image, and it's generally that first image, but at this new resolution. Now, if I were just to try and take this, and I'm going to copy it over here. So if I were just to take this image and I wanted to resize it, yeah, that's not great. So it's much better to kind of process it in this way with the model than it is to just try and resize it manually. So that's what Neural Resize does. What's the next one here? Detail. Oh, that's a fun one. Okay. So this image this is pretty detailed. It's got some stuff going on. Let's actually reduce the colors down. This is a different thing that I'll go over in more detail later. But this is basically a way of controlling the colors in something. So there, I've reduced the colors down. That's effectively less detailed now, so that's really useful. All right, so Neural Tools, Detail. And here we can change how much detail this image has. Generally, it's close. It's not always going to be perfect. So let's regenerate this with a detail level of 5. That's the default. All right, so you can see it it added some stuff, right? There's a little bit more going on. There's a little bit more more details visible to us. So if I go back to that original image, we can turn the details up to, let's go all the way up to 8. So with details set to 8, it's going to make a lot more details. There's going to be more stuff. Yeah, this is a little overboard here. I wouldn't recommend going all the way up to 8 for details unless you start with something really, really simple, because it kind of starts just turning into noise. But you can see there's a lot more details now, and it's still maintaining that original composition of the image fairly well. If I set the details lower, maybe I set the details to 2. Oh, my selection is not happy with me. Let's try that again. There we go. Yeah, so you can see this is a lot closer to that detail level that we started with. Not a ton going on, kind of just simple shading and outlines and stuff. All right, so that's how detail works. Now we've got a kind of a weird option, and I'm going to grab an input for this because it's a little hard to demonstrate otherwise. So if I grab this this picture here. Let's set it back down to native resolution. There we go. So if I grab this, and this is a crown that I drew. This was a gift for a friend a while ago. Okay. So if I now go to Neural Tools and Transform, you see this looks a lot more like our generic text image, and that's because it basically is. We're going to be using this image as a reference and regenerating it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a car on a blank background. So now it's going to try and turn this crown that we have. It's going to try and turn that into a car, and it's not always going to be very good, and it's kind of, this is a very difficult tool to use well. But you can see it's sort of adhering to those same colors and composition as the image that we gave it. So it might prefer being transformed into a different thing. Like I said, this one is just it's difficult to use very well. Something that it's better at is if I grab this guy here. Some of you probably recognize this. If I scale this down, we can try and turn him into Santa Claus. So if I go transform here, we're just going to go with Santa Claus and see what it'll do. Yeah, so it's a lot closer. That's Santa Claus-ish, and you can see that it's sort of stuck to that same composition and same kind of way that it looks, the colors. So next up we have control nets. These are pretty fun. I'm going to close out these tabs just to keep things organized here. And wipe out all this. Okay. Control nets. These are fun. To use this effectively, you'll want to open up the control net menu. And the way that control nets work is it's basically an input, so some sort of style of input, sketch, depth, pose, composition, and tile. And what sketch is it is just a sketch. So let me show you something here. I'm just gonna do like maybe a head, and then we've got the neck, and then the rest of the body. This is gonna be terrible proportionally. This is awful. This is so bad. I went to art school, I promise. Okay, that's slightly better. Give him some awful eyes there, and that. This is truly cursed, and I am sorry. But it is what it is, and it'll be good enough for showing what this tool does. So if I grab this, and then I click load selection here, it did not like that selection I made. Come on. Black on black. Oh, okay. You will want a white background for your sketch. There we go. That's better. We're going to leave off the pre-process image for sketch control net. So this pre-processing would be if you had a realistic image that you wanted to turn into a sketch and then use that as the basis for this. So I'm just going to leave this all where it is, and I'm going to go back here and control that text to image. I'm going to say a portrait of a man with brown hair. Cool. And we'll click generate. we go. So you can see here that it used that shape of that sketch that we made to create this portrait of the guy. And it just generally followed kind of what we have scribbled down there. So that's the way that Sketch works, and it's super cool. It's really useful. Depth uses a depth map image, if you know what that is. If you don't, you can look it up. It's basically a grayscale. You can also pre-process things, so it'll kind of determine like the depth that the image has, and it'll do that for you. Pose uses something called an open pose skeleton, and I'll show that in a moment here. Composition takes the general composition of the image that you give it and uses that to generate a new image. That one is the one that I find myself using the most. It's sort of like image to image that we talked about before, but it's a little bit smarter. It's a little bit stronger as well. And tile, it's a little hard to describe what tile does, but generally it's used for upscaling things. If you want more information about any of these, you can look up ControlNet tile, ControlNet pose, ControlNet depth, blah, blah, blah. There's also some nice buttons here. So if I wanted to take this sketch and I wanted to send it over to the depth node, I can just click send to depth there. And now when I go here, you can see I've got that image, and it asked me if I wanted to enable it. I'm going to clear this because I don't actually want that. Clear that, and we're going to go to pose here. I'll close this for now. So what the pose control net is you need to create an open pose skeleton, and there's a tool for this built into Retro Diffusion. So if you go to view here, and then you go to pose editor menu, you can open up this little pose editor, and you can click and drag on the points, and these correspond to different points on this this little skeleton you've got here. All right, so this pose skeleton, it's got points corresponding to the ears, to the eyes, to the nose, legs, obviously, arms, hands, blah, 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 blah. I can reset this. You can load other images of this style from this select file button. And you can take this and you can send it to the canvas that you're working on. So if I've got a pose of a guy, I'm actually gonna let's make a selection. Let's make a selection like that. It's going to send that to the canvas. It'll change the proportions of the model to fit that that space that you're sending it to. So now if I go back to text to image here, or sorry, that's the wrong thing. If I go to ControlNet text to image, and then maybe I want a man wearing a suit of armor. There we go. And it's already got that width and height set in for me. I will need to take this selection and then go to the ControlNet menu and pose, and load it, and enable it. And now we're using that, and I'm going to disable this pre-processing because we already have the processed version. This is the raw input for that ControlNet. If you had maybe like a picture of a person, you could use this pre-processing and it would actually generate this skeleton for you. We're not going to do that. All right, so now if I click OK on the ControlNet text to image here, it will start generating that, that person in that pose. There you go. So you can see it followed the skeleton that we had told it to. If I actually drag this skeleton above, you can see it pretty closely follows it. And there's some other stuff you can do to get it to be more accurate. You can make these proportions a little bit more human, for one, because it likes generating things that are actually properly human shaped. Yeah, you can change the prompt, stuff like that. So that's kind of how the the control nets work. And I'm actually just I'm gonna reset them all. So when you click that reset control net, it just clears everything, puts the settings back to default, all that kind of stuff. So those are the options that you have for control net text image. As far as the actual control nets themselves go, there are some other options that are really cool. This is one of the more important things, maybe, if you're like working on a game. You can actually have this palette input. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab an interesting color palette. Let's go with ARQ16 here. And I'm going to select the active palette. So this is the active palette over here. And we're going to generate an image using the active palette. Let's go to 128 by 128, and we'll load up the default prompt. Just that, that raven with the mountains and stuff. All right, so I'm going to hit generate here. Close that out. There we go. So now it's actually generating this image, trying to follow the color palette that I currently have. So it does one pass, and then it does a final pass that really sticks to it. So now I've got that image of a raven in the mountains, but it's following the color palette I have here, and specifically using the colors from it. I can actually load up let's load. I don't see any good palettes there. Hold on. Let's load something a little bit more restrictive and see what it does with it. Maybe EDG8. That's a nice little palette. Okay. This is still set to active palette, so I'm going to hit OK again, and it'll start generating that. So you can see it had a little bit more trouble with that, and that's just because the colors are more restricted. But it followed them, and it did a pretty decent job there. Yeah, so that's how you can directly use a color palette for generating images. You can also, of course, just have an already generated image. If I go back to that dude we've got here, we can actually try reducing his colors down to this active palette using that paletize thing that I was showing before. We have that active palette set. There we go. But that doesn't always work as well. It might be better to generate the image with the colors first. Okay, so that covers control nets. Great. All right, cool. We can move on to something else now. So this, the retrodiffusion.ai tab here, this actually uses the retrodiffusion.ai website to generate images, and it sends them back to Aseprite. So the way that you set that up is you have settings here, and you put your API key here. This is blocked out, so you can't take it. Haha, sorry. But you can also click this button here to view keys, and that'll open it up in your browser. You can sign in, sign up, whatever you need to do. If you don't have an account yet, you can actually sign up and you get 50 free credits. And it does cost credits to generate images using the API. And that's just because, the image generation is running on our servers and costing us money. So we have to charge you money, otherwise we can't do it anymore. And that wouldn't be good for anyone. So if you go to the retrodiffusion.ai tab here and API text to image, you'll have slightly different settings from the other text to image stuff, and that's just because we have some different settings on our website. We also have different styles. So, you can choose from the list of different styles here. And I'm gonna go with, yeah, we'll generate that raven on a raven with mountains in the background, that default prompt. the default style. And you can see this is very clearly different from the stuff that the extension was generating before, right? And we can change the style here. It's also incredibly fast. This isn't processing on your local computer, so it's not using any of your resources. This is using our servers, our really, really fast inference provider. And you can make images at pretty crazy sizes. This does 256 by 256. That's the default resolution. And that still only costs 1 credit. There we go. Yeah, so it just cranked out that massive image, no problem at all. Actually, I can set the size up to, hold on, we'll go with canvas size here. 512 by 512. There we go. And this is the maximum resolution that it can do. And that takes 5 credits. When you start getting up in resolutions, it costs more credits. That's just how it is. And this will take a little bit longer than the previous responses, obviously. It should be 20, 25-ish seconds. Yeah, there we go. It takes a little bit for Aseprite to load these larger images. Yeah, so there. Pretty good, especially at that very high resolution. And it's got, different styles. If I wanted to have maybe a man wearing sci-fi armor. And then if I wanted that, let's go with a game asset style. Just gonna take a little bit and then should return that. Sometimes it does hit some internal retries, so it takes a little bit longer. But there we go. And you can see just the quality of this model using the website is very, very high. And that's because this model is incredibly large. It doesn't run on nearly any consumer graphics card. And that's why it's not running locally yet. We're working on it. We're getting close. We're trying to fit down this large model into something that will run on consumer hardware that we can actually put in this extension locally so that you don't have to run it through the site and you can get quality generations like this. But obviously that's an enormous technical challenge and it's taking a long time. But we're working on it, I promise. You can also do the same with image to image. You can take that example and use that as the starting point to generate something else. All right, what else we got? Remove background. Hey, this is a perfect image example for that. We can remove the background from this. Just this clean image setting, remove transparent pixels. So there might be semi-transparent pixels, right? Generally, you don't want those. So this is enabled by default. It just deletes all those. And then this is the threshold for what it deletes. So we're going to click that. It'll process real fast, and there you go, background removed. You can also do this on more complex images. So maybe we want to remove the background from this. Oh, it's still doing it on that thing. And that's why it's important to make sure you have the correct layer selected. I was on the wrong layer there. Let's try that again. There. And you can see it pretty effectively chopped out the Raven from the rest of the surrounding stuff. It's really fast. It doesn't take much processing power for that. And you can just cut things out and it looks pretty good most of the time. All right, what else do we have? We have generate textures. Oh, right. I remember what that is. All right, let's move to a new canvas here. We're going to go to 32 by 32. And I'm going to actually use the site to generate some Minecraft style textures. So we're going to get a Minecraft texture, and let's go with stone bricks. Stone bricks. All right, there we go. Okay, and we've got our stone bricks now. Wonder how these look. Do these tile nice? Oh, that's nice. Very nice texture. Okay, cool. So we've got these stone bricks, and we can actually just go ahead and generate textures. So what this is going to do is it's going to take this texture and it's going to create some um, rendering specific versions of it, and I'll explain what that means after we make it. We're going to leave it at seamless here. All right, so it made those new things very, very fast. So we've got the texture itself, we've got the normal map of the texture, the roughness map, and the depth map. So if I can actually go to View and Texture Preview, this is something that's included in the extension, we can actually see that map that it's generated of this texture. And in this case, it looks like the depth map might have been inverted. Yeah, there we go. You get that sometimes. And you can see it's got lighting that affects it, and you can exaggerate the depth here so you can really see, the shape of that. You can move the lighting around a bit. You can decide if you want to normalize the depth or not. So that just helps keep all of the depths kind of similar if you're looking at different textures. But then what you can do is you can take these textures and you can export them to maybe like a Minecraft texture pack that uses shaders, or a video game that has some kind of 3D lighting. And this is just a quick way of creating and viewing these three-dimensional elements from just the flat texture. All right, what do we got now? Palletize. Cool, perfect. Let's go over that. So I've got this texture, and this actually looks like it uses a lot of colors. So what I want to do is I want to reduce the colors down, and I can use Palletize to do that. So I can either restrict it to, the colors in the active palette, and let's just see what that looks like. So there we go. So it pulled colors from here, and it used the closest ones, and it matched them to the image. That's what that does. I could use automatic. So this will look at the image and decide, okay, this has too many colors. How many colors can it get reduced down to before it starts losing detail? That's what that setting does. You can provide it with a folder that contains multiple palettes, and it will try and choose the best palette to match this image from that folder. Adaptive, you can tell it the number of colors that you want specifically, and it'll reduce it to that number of colors. Active palette, we went over that. You can select a default palette from the list included with Aseprite. You can choose a file, or you can point it to a URL for a palette image. You've got some different settings down here for dithering. Let me grab a different image. We'll generate something. We'll generate something here. Okay. I have some hotkeys set up, so that's why I didn't have to navigate through the menus. Default settings. Yeah. Okay. So let's generate that default Raven again. Okay. I don't like that one. I'm going to make another one. Also not a fan. There we go. That's better. Okay, so I've got this image, and maybe I want to reduce its colors down further. So I can do that. I'm going to reduce this all the way down to 6 colors, which is not a lot of colors. And I'm going to give it some dithering. So that dithering is this textured pattern you see. And you can do this with images that are already in a palette, or you could generate an image without those automatic reduce output colors option. So now you can see that this uses a lot of colors. It's got smoother transitions and everything like that. So when I reduce this down, let's go to 10 colors. You can see the dithering is a little bit more accurate. It's kind of a smoother thing going on. Yeah, so that's what dithering does. You can denoise the image. This has a little bit of a weird setting. You typically only want to do it if the image you're trying to reduce the colors for has like spots or speckles or like weird stuff going on in it. Generally, I just leave that off. It's not useful for most images. It's a very, very specific kind of thing. All right, what do we got next? Color style transfer. Oh, that's a fun one. Okay, let's go back to this image. So I've got these stones, and then let's make a new image here that's 32 by 32. And we're gonna generate uh, gold block. Perfect. Minecraft texture. I don't even need to say block. I'm just gonna go with gold. All right. There we go. So let's say I wanted these colors on this image. Now I could use palletize, like I just showed. If I go back here and then new palette from Sprite, okay, you can see I've got this palette of gold now, and I could go to palletize active palette and you convert it there, but that looks like garbage. That does not look good at all. And that's because it's trying to use the closest color. And so if the closest color is this always, it's not going to look good. But with with color style transfer, what I can do instead is I can open up this menu here. I can select the image, load the selection, and then go over here and I can process this image to use the colors from this on this in a much smarter way. And what this is doing is something called histogram matching, and that's based on the color histogram, which is the different amounts of um, you know red, green, blue colors over black to white. It's a little bit hard to describe, but basically it's following the color composition of this. So like the amount of light and dark things, the amounts of the different colors, and it's trying to apply it to the image that you are processing. So this can be really, really useful if you've got like a specific color palette for your game and you're trying to convert images that you generate to that color palette. This is a great tool for that. All right, what else do we got here? K-centroid resize. Okay, this is another fun example. So let's open up something here. We'll go with this house image again. Okay. So I talked about before how this is kind of pixel art-ish. And so maybe if you wanted to make it closer to pixel art, you would try something like resizing it. Let's go to 128 by 128. You've got some different options for how you want to resize stuff. We'll stick with nearest neighbor. Great, now all the pixels are the same size, but it looks like garbage. So clearly that's not a good option for resizing. So what kcentroid resize is, it is my own algorithm for resizing images, and it tries to stick a lot better to pixel art. It's also got this additional preserve outlines option, and I'm going to leave that enabled for this image because it has outlines, and we want to keep those. So you can see that that is way, 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 way better than nearest neighbor. It's also better than pretty much every other downscaling option. If I leave off that preserve outlines setting, I want to show what that looks like too. Yeah, still better than nearest neighbor. So what this is kind of doing is it's picking like the most prominent color in the section it's downscaling to. And so that's what lets it be a little bit more accurate than just your normal resizing. Okay, I don't think I have anything else in this menu. Let's check. Oh, okay. There's a cool setting, or sorry, a cool script in FX repair pixel art. So if you've got an image like this and you want to try and make it into pixel art without a lot of work, you can do that. And it tries to make it into pixel art automatically. So it detects what the best width and height would be based on some complex like color frequency analysis stuff. And it tries to make that happen. So that's a fun one if you've maybe generated images with DALL-E 3 or Midjourney or something like that, and you're trying to reduce them to pixel art. That one operates without AI, so it doesn't actually generate anything. It just scales it kind of in a smart way. All right, what else do I have? I think that covered pretty much everything there. Okay, so in the help menu, we've got a whole bunch of stuff. You can set up Retro Diffusion from here. You can open documentation from here. You can open the settings. So I'll go over the settings now because that's something we can do. So you've got those performance settings from the setup here. You've also got a floating point precision selection. This isn't really relevant. Basically, if you don't know what it is, don't touch it. It just changes the way that the math works, and that can sometimes make it faster. It can sometimes make it require less memory, but the way GPUs are right now, a lot of them aren't compatible with some of these options. So it figures it out automatically for you, and this is more of a technical setting. If you don't like the little beeping noises that it has when generations are sent or finish, you can turn off sounds. You can also change the sound files if you want it to sound different. This is where you add that API key from retrodiffusion.ai so that you can use the site to generate things. This automatically enhanced prompts thing, this specifically, it just appends some stuff, some fixed text to the prompts that you write in just to make generations better. I recommend basically always leaving that on. Turning it off is more for experimenting with the base model itself, and it's just, you won't really get good images unless you know exactly what you're doing. Use last seed automatically. So it will always use the last or the seed of the last image that was run. This can be helpful if you're trying to like iterate on an idea and you don't want to have to keep typing in the seed. Batch generation size. So this batch generation size determines okay, how large of a thing is it going to try and put images together in, right? So if I told it make 16 64 by 64 images, that's sort of equivalent to making one 256 by 256 image. And that's what this size refers to, is the maximum size thing that you want to try and fit in one batch. You've also got some more advanced UI settings here. So you can change, you can close the generation menus. If you noticed, when I click OK on the generation menus, they've been staying open. You can disable that. You can have them close automatically. You can snap to a certain number of width and height. This is the minimum and maximum sizes. This will show or hide the size presets, minimum and maximum modifiers / LoRa strengths, and the number of modifiers / LoRas that can be applied at once. You also have the storage settings, the location of the models folder, the LoRa folder, and the virtual environment. You can also reset everything with this button here. Okay, we've got some help information. A lot of these are kind of outdated, so I'm sorry about that. It's a little bit difficult to keep up with. That's part of why I'm making this guide. All right, we've got, this is just the central location for basically every script. And I can see I've run over most of these. So prompt to prompt uses that language model we were talking about earlier to take the prompt that you give it and turn it into a new prompt and give it back to you. We'll do an example of that. Why not? Let's call it a background. That's easy enough. Okay. Loading that prompt translation thing, and it sent it back to us. So we got, that is a very long prompt. Hold on. Let me grab it. So that reads out, in the center of a dark, empty room, a woman with long brown hair and piercing green eyes gazes intently at a small figure with a white beard. She wears a red dress with a black bow on her head and a pair of glasses. The background is dark. So you can see it took that prompt we gave it and expanded it into something new. You can also, if you give it a little bit more direction, like maybe a nature scene. Great. And so now it generates a different one. A lush green forest with tall trees and vibrant flowers stands at the center of the scene. The sun is setting, casting a warm orange glow on the trees and the surrounding foliage. A family of ducks paddles through the air, while a fox with a yellow hat wanders by in the distance. Yeah, so this is kind of where that language model shows its capability and its size. It's not very smart. Like, I don't think you'd see a family of ducks paddling through the air necessarily. But that's just, it's more to give you some inspiration for ideas than it is to actually make a good prompt. Okay, then there's also the describe image thing. I don't think we covered that. So let's go over describe image. So if I select this, then go to describe image, you can see it loaded up that image for us already. We can give it some start with this information, but I'm not going to do that. So we just hit OK. I have to load this again because I closed the terminal before. And there we go, a close-up of a small house with a thatched roof. And you can do that for any image, and it just kind of works. New palette from prompt. Okay. This is that palette gen model that I talked about way at the beginning when we were going over setup. And what this does is it creates color palettes. So I'm going to set the theme. This is the default here, vibrant sunset, and we want 8 colors. So if I click OK, it'll load up that model. There we go. That's a color palette. I'm going to generate a new one. And you can just keep generating these color palettes, and they will generally follow that that theme that you give it. You can change the number of colors, so maybe I want 24 colors, and it'll just keep making different color palettes for you. Some of them are really cool. Some of them are really not. But it's a fun little tool that you can use. All right. In the tools section here, we've got first off the prompt style manager. So this is how you can manage those presets that you have. I need to rename this to the preset manager because that's been updated. Sorry about that. And you can just add new ones. You can import, export them, delete them, create them, edit them, all that stuff. This is the tool for updating Retro Diffusion. I've got a video going over that. It is still applicable now. So whenever I put out an update, I link to that video and you can go and watch it. Repair Retro Diffusion. This is helpful if you're running into some like weird errors. Sometimes I'll, in the process of helping fix stuff, I'll tell you to run this and it'll just reset some stuff and install things again, and it's very useful. Start image generator. This will just start the terminal here. So if I close this and then I go start image generator, you can see it just started up again. And it's not processing any kind of request, it just loads. Then I can also shut down the image generator. You can see that sent a shutdown request and it closed it. There's also a cancel process. So if you are like running an image generation and you've got previews enabled, you can actually just cancel it mid-generation. You can just tell it to stop and it'll stop. This download models button here, you can click that and you can select a folder and this will download the standalone model files. Those can be used with automatics, web UI, they can be used with comfy UI, invoke AIs, canvas thing. They're generic stable diffusion 1.5 formatted models that you can run in other AI image generators. Okay, you have different things here for opening the models folder, the LoRa's folder, and the Python virtual environment. So these might be helpful if maybe you want to know where these models are, or if you want to know, or if you want to add different modifiers. So like I could open this up and it opens up this folder where I keep all of the LoRa's that I'm running. The .pxlm ones are Retro Diffusion's base modifiers. And you can put safe tensors files in here for different styles that you want to use. These have to be for stable diffusion 1.5 architecture models. Again, make sure that that's correct, otherwise they won't load. And then you also have the uninstall button. Obviously, you don't want to click that unless you want to uninstall Retro Diffusion. And it will actually prompt you with, hey, are you sure you want to do that? Sometimes you need to do that in the process of fixing errors. Usually it's better to manually uninstall it. And I think with that, we've actually covered everything. So that's pretty cool. I'll just leave us with a final generation here of that lovely Raven. Oh, I'm in the wrong style. Great. Yep, one final generation, and we'll call it done. There we go. All right. And with that, you should know, well, maybe not everything that there is about retro diffusion, but you should at least know where stuff is and kind of generally what stuff does. So thanks for watching along with this if you did. And sorry it's so long and rambling. I hope it's not too confusing. I'll do my best to label the chapters well. Yeah, if you want to learn some more specific stuff, I've got some other videos on my channel, specifically about control nets. That's a really good video to watch if you want to learn more about those and how to get the most out of them. Yeah, thanks for using Retro Diffusion. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you around.